Hi, my name is Deanna Rossi. I am the author of the book, No Justificuses. I know, people ask all the time, what is a justificuse? Well, it's a blend of two words, justifications and excuses, to come up with justificuses. But you should never make a justificuse. And actually, the word, this blended word, was something that I've been using in my circles for over a couple of decades. People in my office and in our family, people were making excuses and justifications, and they shouldn't make either, so it turned into just don't even make a justificuse. So that is how the word justificuse came together. And when I was naming my book, I was talking to some friends about some ideas for the name of the book, and one of my friends said, "Oh, the justificuses, I like that." He says, "It reminds me of you a lot, a little old Italian lady." And he says, "I can hear you saying, that's just another effing excuse." I said, "Well, that wasn't the intent, but we'll roll with it." And so the title No Justificuses was born. Now, I do want to tell you the story of how the book came about. You see, I was on a flight coming from Florida to Ohio, and we stopped over in Nashville. I was traveling with my husband and my two kids. We were coming back from a little vacation. The connection was really tight. There had been a storm, so we were delayed on the first flight, and we were kind of trucking it through the Nashville airport. And as we come up to the gate where our flight is about to leave from, there's a long line of people. It's at the Southwest Airlines, so you know how everyone lines up. They're all lined up ready to go and boarding. And I see somebody that I know. And I run up to her and I give her a hug and I'm like, "Hi, it's so good to see you." And then all of a sudden, I start to realize I couldn't really see her. My vision had crisscrossed and kind of part of my vision disappeared. And obviously, you can imagine when you have vision issues that I got very dizzy very quickly. And I said, "Wow, I think I need to sit down." I kind of plopped into one of those airport chairs. And my husband said, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not okay." He says, "All right, just take a breath." And my kids had got on the flight. And he says, "Babe, we need to get on this flight. Everybody's boarded." And I said, I'm not feeling okay. Now, there's two types of people in this world. I've always said this. There's the type of people that during an emergency, they flip out, they freak out, they're screamers, right? They kind of don't know how to handle things. And then there are others that are just a calm in the storm. My husband and I are both the latter. So when I told him something wasn't right, he was super calm and I was super calm. And he says, "Babe, I'm guessing that you probably just haven't eaten enough today. We've been really running around ragged." He says, "When we get on the flight, I'll get you a cookie. Here, grab my arm. It'll be okay." He's such a calming force. And I said, "Okay." So I grab his arm. We start to walk onto the plane, walk down the jetway. And as we're walking down the jetway, my vision is all weird and I'm dizzy. I start to feel some tingling all down my right side. So we get onto the plane, and moms, you can appreciate this. I needed to make sure I was in the same place my kids were, right? So they're teenagers at the time, and I just needed to make sure I was on that flight with them. Even though I wasn't feeling well, I said, I got to make sure that I'm with the kids. So I kind of see them, right? My vision's all split and weird, and I see them, I locate them, and I plop down in a seat. And my husband sits next to me. We sit there, and I said, "Babe, I don't think I'm okay." And he says, "Honey, just close your eyes. You probably just haven't had enough to eat today. Your blood sugar's probably low. As soon as they do service, I'll get you a cookie. It'll be fine." And I said, "Okay." He says, "I'll put my arm around you. Just relax." So I do. I listen to him and I close my eyes. And as I close my eyes, what I end up seeing is I end up seeing my husband over top of my body as I'm laying on the aisle of the airplane. And I see a stewardess over top of my body. And he's saying, "You've got to land the plane." And she says to him, "We can't get down that fast." He's like, "You've got to do something. She's dying." And I see my daughter peering over the seat watching this scene. The interesting part is my view of this scene was not from the floor laying down. I actually wasn't laying on the floor. I was out of my body, if you will. The view of this was from the overhead bins, looking down on this scene with my husband and the stewardess and my daughter all looking over me. And when he said those words, "She's going to die," all of a sudden I just kind of shook, and now I'm back sitting in the actual chair. So maybe that was a premonition, if you will, but I'm sitting there, my husband's eyes are closed, and I tap him. And I said, babe, I'm not okay. And he says, well, what's going on? I said, my vision is messed up. I'm dizzy. I'm not feeling well. And as I'm talking to him, my entire right side starts to go numb. It starts from the top of my hair follicles, down the side of my face, down my arm. My arm starts to claw up, literally claws up in front of me. My leg then starts to go numb. My toes go numb. So you can imagine having the worst Charlie horse you've ever had. You ever have a Charlie horse and all your toes curl up over each other? That's what was happening. All my toes curl up over each other, but multiply that by 1,000, because then my ankles started to turn in. And I see my whole body start to just shrink. And I said to him, honey, I'm really not okay. I'm going completely numb. I said, I think we need to land a plane. At this point, the plane is literally taking off of the runway. And he says, honey, if we stop the plane, it's an FAA event. I said, honey, I'm having a TIA event. And he says, if you're having a TIA event, you're still speaking to me. You're not slurring your words. And I said, but I can't see in this numbness. And he says, well, maybe just relax, because by the time they land this plane, we're going to be there. There's only 45 minutes left in the flight. And he ends up being right about that. That was definitely the right call, not to land the plane. But I couldn't just sit there and do nothing, because I know I'm going to end up, that premonition may come true. And so I'm sitting there, and I said to him, I can't just do nothing. And it comes to me. I said, go in my purse. He says, what? I said, get into my purse. There's aspirin in there. And he goes in my purse, and he doesn't see the aspirin, but what he sees is Excedrin. You see, interestingly, the day before I had had a headache, and a terrible headache. Now that morning I was fine, and I was at the first airport, and I'm getting the kids chips and pop and all that. And I'm at the little kiosk, and I see Excedrin. And there was this little voice that said to me, that has aspirin in it. You need to grab that. I had a little tinge of a headache, but nothing to speak of at the moment. But something told me, had whispered on my soul, if you will, that has aspirin in it. You need it. And I had grabbed that Excedrin and bought that Excedrin and threw it in my purse. So now we're on the plane, and I tell him I need that. He goes into my purse and he gives me the pills, and I can't grab them because my hand isn't functioning. I tried to grab them with my left hand, and I'm still having difficulty, dexterity-wise, to get them in my mouth. And I take a sip of water. There's like a drip, and I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to be okay? So I close my eyes, and I say, this is all I can do at this moment. And I went into just deep prayer, saying, oh my goodness, what is going to happen? And I literally was starting to negotiate with God at this point. And I'm like, listen, I'm fresh in my marriage. We've been married for a couple of years. I said, my new husband and my kids don't deserve to be pushing me around for years if I'm debilitated. I said, I need to be healed. I started seeing this white liquid. It was like illuminated liquid, starting from my toes, just filling me up like I was a vessel, like a vase, just filling up with this white liquid, and had these little gold flecks in it. Started at my feet, went all the way up my legs, up my abdomen, down my arms, then started going up my chest and through my neck and out of the top of my head. That's what I saw when my eyes were closed. This illuminated white liquid with these flecks of gold. Interestingly, as the flight went on, I started getting more feeling on the side of my body. By the time the flight lands, I was able to get off the plane myself. I needed the assistance of my husband. I had enough feeling to get off the plane, but I did not have my vision, and it wasn't clear, and I was very dizzy. So we get off the plane, and I make a phone call. It's 10:30 at night, and I call my primary care physician, who happens to be my cousin. This is why he answers my call at 10:30 at night. So I start to try to tell him what's going on, but I can't even complete the explanation. I had to hand the phone off to my husband, and he tells us to go straight to the hospital. So we get to the hospital, and they start doing assessments. I'm a very healthy 43-year-old woman at this point. And they finally identify and say the worst. She had a stroke. And the neurologist comes in. And at this point, I'm having this great conversation with my husband, and we're talking. And he says to the neurologist when he comes in, oh, yeah, so she had a mini stroke. And he says, a mini stroke? No. He says, listen, you need to take this more seriously. And he goes, pops up on the screen the images. He said she had over a 2-inch stroke, like a huge stroke. And he shows us these images. He says, this is a huge, damage to her brain. How she is sitting in front of us right now and not drooling or massively incapacitated, or, even the fact that she's able to speak clearly is unbeknownst to us. And it had to be that aspirin that she took on that flight that helped to thin her blood enough so there's not more damage. We need to do all kinds of tests and find out what caused this. Is this going to happen again? What's going on here? What else I find interesting is that I think that certain people are put in your life for a reason. You see, when I was in 4th grade, I was at a library. My mom's a teacher, and there's another teacher at the library, and she has a little girl that's my age. They start talking to each other and introduce us, and they arrange a play date. Well, that girl that I had that play date with became one of my bestest friends. She moved away, yet we stayed really close. She goes to med school, and I started having a family and starting my business. She was the type of friend that not only was the maid of honor in my wedding, but she's the one that my son was born in April, and in May, as soon as she gets out of classes, she flies back to Ohio, and she comes, she's giving me a pedicure, rubbing my feet, washing the baby's clothes, and just taking care of me. She's that type of friend. Well, that friend became one of the top neurologists and stroke specialists in the country. Interestingly, before this incident, maybe a couple years before, the hospital she was working for asked her to do some front-facing work, some video work. And she sent me some of the clips and said, hey, give me your pointers. What do you think? And I had watched her videos about stroke education. That's how I knew what was happening to me at that moment, because of those videos I watched. Interesting twists of fate, isn't it? That all those things came together at that moment, that I knew to take that Excedrin, but I also had that whisper that, hey, that has aspirin in it and you're going to need it. So what ends up happening is after I leave the hospital, after a couple of days, they're going to have me going back and forth for all kinds of tests. Is it clotting disorders? Is it this? Is it that? But they can't treat this terrible pain I have in my head. I had a brain injury, right? I had a stroke, and they don't know how they can treat it because they don't know what's happening. Do I have a clotting disorder? What's happening? So I'm in terrible, excruciating pain, and this happened to the occipital center of my brain. So any extended period of light was just killing me. So I'm in a dark room, a blacked out drapes room, recovering from this stroke for a couple of months and going back and forth to doctor's appointments. And as I laid in that room, I couldn't turn on the TV. I couldn't look at my phone because the light would bother me. So what do you do with yourself? Well, a lot of people ask me, did you crawl in a dark hole of depression? Interestingly, I didn't. I think I started just telling myself what I would tell someone else that was in that position. So what did I ended up doing is I ended up taking my phone out and setting it talk to text. I started telling myself stories that I would tell someone else to encourage them. You see, I had the amazing opportunity in my business to be coached by some of the most incredible entrepreneurs in the United States. And I started thinking about all of their advice to me and all the advice that I've passed on to other people as I've helped them in other ways. And so I set the phone, talk to text, and I started telling myself those stories, those anecdotes, started going over the things that have brought me through other dark times. And it was that information that I had put down, talk to text, that then became the book, No Justificuses. You see, they found out that I had no reason to have a stroke. No clotting disorders, no problems, no reason for that to happen. They ended up telling me we can't figure out how this all came about. Well, I'll tell you what I think. All of that came about so that I could put together this book and put together this information and be able to get it out to everyone out there that needs to have that little thought, that little whisper that's going to help you overcome your adversity. So whatever it is that you're going through, you're going to hear stories in the book and in some of the things that you're going to be exposed to through No Justificuses that will tell you not only about how I overcame adversity, but different anecdotes of people that I've worked with or heard from or have had the blessing to experience. You're going to hear how they not just overcame their adversities, or there were some stories in there of how I've overcome some great loss. There's some coming of age stories of how I was able to overcome the challenges that were put on me as a very young 22-year-old female in a male-dominated industry. And also some parenting anecdotes as well. I hope that the information through No Justificuses helps you really look at whatever it is that you're trying to overcome right now. So it may be an adversity, it may be a relationship issue, it may be a thought process, it may be something that you're trying to manage your way out of or past. I'll tell you this, on the other side of uncomfortable is everything you ever wanted. I believe now that everything that had happened to me and all this information that got put into the book because I had that downtime from this stroke all came together for a reason. I think there is a little whisper in there, and that's why you're here today listening to this right now, is because there is something in there that is going to allow you to get on the other side of uncomfortable so you can get to everything you ever wanted.